The rain turned the dirt to mud, and the mud made the digging slow. That was fine. I had gotten good at slow over the last 3 years. Slow walking, slow talking, slow living, like a man underwater, holding his breath, waiting for permission to surface. I was 2 feet deep when I heard the horse. The shovel stopped mid-thrust. I stood there in the hole I had made, rain hammering my shoulders, listening. One horse, coming fast. Too fast for someone just passing through Cedar Hollow at this hour. The only people who rode hard at night were the ones running from something or the ones coming for you. I climbed out of the hole and looked down at what I had been trying to bury. A metal box, small, rusted at the corners. Inside it were 3 things I could not bear to keep in the house, but could not bring myself to destroy. A piece of fabric from my mother's dress, the blue one she wore to church. It still had her blood on it, brown now, 3 years old. A woman's shoe that did not belong to her. I had found it near the ravine where she died, half buried in the creek bed, and I still did not know who it belonged to or why it was there. And a note in her handwriting written the week before she died. "Forgive me, Ethan. I should have told you sooner." She never said what. I had read that note maybe 1,000 times in 3 years. I had held it up to lamplight looking for hidden words. I had traced her letters with my fingers as if the shape of them might tell me what her words would not. But there was nothing. Just an apology for a secret she took to her grave. The horse was closer now. I could hear the hooves in the mud, the labored breathing. I shoved the box back into the hole and kicked dirt over it. Not enough to hide it, but enough that it did not look like what it was. Then I grabbed the shovel and walked toward the cabin. The rider came into view just as I reached the porch. A woman. That stopped me. We did not get many women traveling alone out here. Cedar Hollow was not the kind of place women came to by choice. It was the kind of place you ended up when you had run out of choices somewhere else. She sat on a gray mare that looked about as tired as she did. Her hair was dark, soaked flat against her head. She wore a wool coat that might have been nice once, before the rain and the road got to it. In her lap was a carpet bag, held tight like she thought someone might try to take it. She looked at me, I looked at her. Neither of us spoke. Then she said, in a voice that was too steady for someone who looked that miserable, "Are you Ethan Mercer?" I set the shovel against the porch rail. "Depends on who's asking." "My name is Abigail Thorne." She paused, and in that pause, I could see her deciding something. Then she said it. "I'm your mail-order bride." I stared at her. She stared back. "Ma'am," I said slowly, "I never ordered a bride." "Then," she said, and her voice had an edge now, sharp and cold, "we've both been lied to by the same man." She dismounted, not gracefully. She was stiff from riding, and when her boots hit the mud, she nearly went down. I stepped forward without thinking, hand out to steady her, but she waved me off. She stood there swaying slightly, holding that carpet bag like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "I've ridden 2 days to get here," she said. "I'm wet, I'm cold, I'm angry, and I would very much like to come inside and sit down before I say anything else." I nodded. What else could I do? I opened the door. She walked past me into the cabin, and I caught the smell of rain and horse and something else. Lavender, maybe, or rosewater, something from a world that was not this one. She set the carpet bag on the table and stood there looking around. The cabin was small, 1 room, a bed in the corner, a stove, a table with 2 chairs, a trunk at the foot of the bed. It was clean because I had nothing to make it dirty. No clutter, no softness, just the bones of a life. "You live here alone," she said. Not a question. "I do." "For how long?" 3 years. She looked at me then, really looked, and I wondered what she saw. A man, 32 years old, too thin for his frame, hair that needed cutting, beard that needed trimming, eyes that did not meet hers for long. I had gotten good at that too, not looking people in the eye. It was safer. 3 years is a long time to be alone," she said. I did not answer that. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was wet, but not soaked through. She unfolded it carefully and laid it on the table. "This," she said, "is the contract I signed 6 weeks ago in Richmond, Virginia." I looked at it. The paper had an official-looking header, Cedar Hollow Matrimonial Bureau. Beneath that, a lot of words in small print. And at the bottom, 2 signatures. hers, Abigail Thorne, in a neat slanted hand, and beside it, in a bolder script, Vernon Ashford. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Vernon Ashford," I said. "You know him? Everyone in Cedar Hollow knows him. He owns half the town, wants to own the other half." "Does he run a matrimonial bureau?" "No." "Then why?" she said, and her voice was very quiet now. "Does his signature appear on a contract promising me marriage to you in exchange for $50? $50. I looked at her. That was everything. For a woman alone, that was 6 months of wages, maybe more. That was the difference between eating and not eating, between a roof and the road. "He took $50 from you," I said. "He did." "And you came all the way here because of this?" "I did." I sat down in one of the chairs. My legs felt weak suddenly. Not from the digging. From the weight of understanding what Vernon Ashford had done. He had used my name. He had used this woman's hope. He had taken her money and sent her into the wilderness to find a man who did not know she existed. "Why?" she asked. She was still standing, hands flat on the table, looking down at me. Why would he do this? I could have lied. I could have said I did not know, but I was tired of lying. 3 years of it had worn me down to nothing. "Because he wants my land," I said, "and he will do anything to get it." "Including this?" "Including murder." The word hung in the air between us. She did not flinch. She did not gasp. She just looked at me with those steady eyes and said, "Whose murder?" "My mother's." She pulled out the other chair and sat down. "Tell me," she said. So I did. I told her about my mother, Mary Pritchard, who married a man named Samuel Mercer and took his name but never really let go of her own. I told her about the land, 240 acres of good grazing ground that sat right in the path of the railroad route Vernon Ashford had been planning for 5 years. I told her about the offers Vernon made, low at first, then higher, then so high it was insulting because it meant he thought we were stupid enough to believe he was being generous. My mother refused everyone. 3 years ago she went to town to buy flour and salt. Her horse came back without her. They found her body at the bottom of the ravine, neck broken, skull cracked against the rocks. The sheriff, a man named Douglas, who has been in Vernon's pocket since before I was born, called it an accident. Spooked horse. Tragic. Nothing to be done. 2 weeks later, a man named Luther Pike, who worked on the ranch next to ours, came forward. He said he had seen something the night my mother died. He said he had heard shouting. He said he had seen me and my mother arguing near the ravine. He said he had heard the horse whinny, and then silence. He did not say he saw me push her. He did not have to. The implication was enough. Sheriff Douglas came to see me, not to arrest me, to talk. He sat in the chair Abigail was sitting in now, and he said, "I don't believe you killed her, Ethan, but Vernon Ashford does, and he has Luther Pike ready to testify in front of a jury. You know what a jury will do to a man accused of killing his own mother?" I knew. "So here's what's going to happen," the sheriff said. "You're going to sell me this land. You're going to take a fair price, and you're going to leave Cedar Hollow, and I'm going to make sure Luther Pike forgets what he saw. No trial, no hanging, just a quiet exit." I told him no. He stood up, put his hat back on, and said, "Then you're a prisoner, boy. You leave Cedar Hollow. I put out a warrant. You fight back, Luther testifies. You sit quiet, you live, for now." And that was how it had been for 3 years. I stayed on my land. I worked it alone. I spoke to no one unless I had to. I watched Vernon Ashford circle me like a wolf circles a dying elk, waiting for the moment I got weak enough to go down. When I finished, Abigail was quiet for a long time. The rain had eased to a drizzle. I could hear it ticking against the roof, softer now, almost gentle. "You've been living like this for 3 years, she said finally. "A prisoner on your own land." "Yes." "And you never tried to prove your innocence." "With what? Luther Pike's word against mine? Vernon owns the sheriff. He owns the judge. He owns everyone who would sit on that jury." "What about the railroad? Your mother tried to contact them, didn't she?" I looked at her sharply. "How do you know that?" "Because," she said, and she reached into her coat again, "I found this." She pulled out another piece of paper. Not a contract this time. A letter. The envelope was addressed to Mary Pritchard, care of the Mercer Ranch, Cedar Hollow, Texas. The return address said Pacific Southern Railroad, Austin, Texas. Where did you find that? I asked. In the drawer of that table, when I was looking for a lamp. I stared at the letter. I had never seen it before, or if I had, I did not remember. The weeks after my mother died were a blur. I had gone through her things in a haze, packing some away, burning others, keeping what I could not bear to part with. I must have missed this. "Open it," I said. She did. The letter was dated 6 months before my mother died. It was short, formal, cold. Dear Mrs. Mercer, we acknowledge receipt of your complaint regarding Mr. Vernon Ashford's representation of Pacific Southern Railroad interests in Cedar Hollow. However, Mr. Ashford is not an authorized agent of this company. We advise you to seek local legal counsel. Sincerely, Pacific Southern Land Acquisition Office. Abigail set the letter down. She knew, she said. She knew Vernon was lying about the railroad. She tried to warn them, and they did nothing. And Vernon found out. We looked at each other across the table. The lamplight made shadows on her face. She looked older than I had thought at first. Not old, but worn, like she had carried something heavy for a long time. He killed her, I said. It was not a question. Yes. And now he's using you to push me out. It would seem so. I leaned back in my chair. I'm sorry, I said. You came all this way for nothing. Vernon won't give you your money back, and I can't marry you. I can barely take care of myself. I'm not asking you to marry me, she said. I'm asking you to let me help. I laughed. It came out bitter. Help how? You're one woman. Vernon has the whole town. I'm one woman, she said, who has seen this before. She stood up and went to her carpet bag. She opened it and pulled out a small leather journal. She set it on the table and opened it to a page near the middle. Inside, in the same neat hand as her signature, were notes, dates, names, amounts of money. My husband was a doctor, she said, in Richmond. He died 2 years ago. The official cause was consumption, but I know he was poisoned. I looked up at her. There was another doctor in town, she said. A younger man, ambitious. He wanted my husband's practice. He offered to buy it. My husband refused. 3 months later, my husband was dead. The death certificate was signed by a doctor I had never heard of, a doctor who, when I went looking, did not seem to exist. You think this other doctor forged it? I know he did, because I found the real doctor, the one whose name was used. He was retired, living 2 towns over. He had never signed a death certificate for anyone named Thomas Thorne. She turned a page in the journal. More notes, more names. I spent 6 months trying to prove it. I went to the police. I went to the medical board. I went to everyone I could think of. No one would listen. And then I started getting threats. Notes slipped under my door. Men following me in the street. I realized that if I stayed, I would end up like my husband. So you left. I ran, she said. I took what money I had left, and I ran. And I kept running until I saw an advertisement for mail-order brides in Cedar Hollow, Texas. I thought maybe, finally, I could stop. She closed the journal. But Vernon Ashford is the same kind of man as the one who killed my husband. He uses the system. He uses people's trust. He makes evil look legal. And you think you can stop him? I think, she said, that I know how to read the lies. And I think you have evidence you don't even know you have. I thought about the chest at the foot of my bed, the papers inside, the land deed, the tax records, the death certificate. I had not looked at them in years. I could not bear to. Even if we find something, I said, who would believe us? Vernon owns everyone. Not everyone, not the railroad. They already know he's lying. If we can connect him to your mother's death, if we can prove he forged documents, they'll have to act. They won't want a murderer associated with their company. It was a thin hope, but it was more than I had in 3 years. Why? I asked. Why would you do this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Vernon took your money, yes, but you could leave, go somewhere else, start over. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, because I'm tired of running, because I couldn't save my husband, but maybe I can save you. And because if I walk away now, Vernon wins, and I'm tired of letting men like him win. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that someone, anyone, could walk into this mess and help me find a way out. But I had been alone for so long, I had gotten used to it, used to the weight of it, and the idea of letting someone carry even a piece of that weight felt dangerous. "You can stay the night," I said. "Take the bed. I'll sleep out here. In the morning, I'll take you to town. There's a woman there, Grace Holloway. She runs a boarding house. She's one of the few people in Cedar Hollow who isn't afraid of Vernon. She'll help you get back to Richmond." "I'm not going back to Richmond." "Then wherever you want to go." She stood up. She looked tired, exhausted really. But there was something in her eyes that had not been there when she first walked in. Something hard and bright. "I'm not leaving, Ethan." "You should." "I know, but I'm not." She picked up her carpet bag and walked to the bed. She set the bag down, took off her wet coat, and draped it over the footboard. Then she sat down on the edge of the mattress and looked at me. "In the morning," she said, "you're going to show me everything. The death certificate, the land deed, the letters, everything you've been too afraid to look at. And we're going to find the lie. Because there's always a lie, Ethan, and once we find it, we're going to use it to bury Vernon Ashford." I did not answer. I just sat there at the table, listening to the rain, watching her. After a while, she lay down, still fully dressed, and pulled the blanket over herself. Within minutes, her breathing slowed. She was asleep. I stayed at the table. I thought about the box in the hole outside, the one I had been trying to bury. I thought about my mother's note. "Forgive me, Ethan. I should have told you sooner." "Told me what?" I got up and went to the chest at the foot of the bed. I opened it quietly, careful not to wake Abigail. Inside were all the papers I had not been able to throw away. I took them out, one by one, and spread them on the table. The death certificate was on top. I had not looked at it since the day the sheriff gave it to me. I looked at it now. Mary Pritchard Mercer, age 54, cause of death, blunt force trauma consistent with a fall from height. Time of death, approximately 8 o'clock in the evening. Examined and certified by Dr. Raymond Colt. I looked at the signature, Raymond Colt. I looked at the contract Abigail had brought, Vernon Ashford. I held them side by side in the lamplight. The handwriting was different, but the slant was the same, the way the capital letters looped, the pressure of the pen. I was not an expert, but I had seen Vernon's handwriting before, on letters, on contracts, on the offers he had made to my mother. I set the papers down and looked at Abigail, sleeping in my bed. She was right, there was a lie, and I had been staring at it for 3 years without seeing it. Dr. Raymond Colt did not exist. Vernon Ashford had signed my mother's death certificate himself. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the table with my mother's death certificate and Vernon Ashford's signature on Abigail's contract, holding them up to the lamp, comparing every curve and line, until my eyes ached. By the time the sun started to rise, I was certain. Vernon had forged the death certificate, which meant there was no Dr. Raymond Colt, which meant my mother's death had never been properly examined, which meant everything the sheriff had told me, everything Luther Pike had testified to, was built on a lie. But knowing it and proving it were two different things. When Abigail woke, I had coffee waiting. She sat up slowly, blinking in the gray morning light, and looked around as if she had forgotten where she was. Then she saw me at the table, and the papers spread out in front of me, and she remembered. "You found something," she said. "Look at this." She came to the table, still wearing yesterday's clothes, her hair loose and tangled. I pushed the 2 documents toward her. She picked them up, held them to the light just as I had, and within 30 seconds she nodded. "Same hand," she said. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Look at the capital R in Raymond. See how it loops back on itself? Now look at the V in Vernon. Same motion, same pressure. And here, the way the T crosses in Colt. It's identical to the way he crosses the T in Thorne on my contract." She set the papers down and looked at me. "Vernon Ashford signed your mother's death certificate using a false name. That means he controlled the narrative of her death from the beginning. If there was no real doctor, there was no real examination, which means we have no idea what actually killed her. The sheriff said she fell. The sheriff works for Vernon. He would say whatever Vernon told him to say." I stood up and went to the stove. The coffee was bitter and strong. I drank it anyway. "So what do we do? Take this to the sheriff and accuse Vernon of forgery? He'll laugh us out of his office." "We don't take it to the sheriff. We take it to the railroad." The railroad didn't help my mother. Your mother went to them with a complaint about representation. We'll go to them with evidence of fraud and murder. That's different. If we can prove Vernon forged a death certificate, if we can prove he's been lying about his association with Pacific Southern, they'll have to investigate. They can't afford to have a scandal like this attached to their name. It sounded reasonable, but reasonable things did not tend to work out in Cedar Hollow. There's something else, Marai said. If we're going to do this, you need to know what you're risking. Vernon doesn't just ruin people, he destroys them. If he finds out you're helping me, he'll come after you. I know. I don't think you do. He killed my mother. He'll kill you too if it suits him. Then we'll have to make sure it doesn't suit him. She said it so calmly, like we were discussing the weather. I wanted to shake her. I wanted to make her understand that this was not some game, not some mystery she could solve and walk away from. This was life and death. Mine. Hers. Anyone who got between Vernon and what he wanted. But I did not shake her. I just looked at her, this woman who had ridden 2 days through the rain to marry a stranger, only to find out she had been lied to, and who now sat in my kitchen drinking bad coffee and talking about taking down the most powerful man in Cedar Hollow like it was the most natural thing in the world. You're either very brave or very foolish, I said. I've been called both. She smiled just a little, usually on the same day. A knock at the door interrupted us. We both froze. I was not expecting anyone. No one came to my cabin unless they had to, and no one had to. Not anymore. I went to the door and opened it. Sheriff Douglas stood on the porch. He was a big man, soft around the middle now, but still strong enough to be dangerous. His hat was pulled low against the drizzle that had started up again. Behind him, I could see his horse tied to the post. "Morning, Ethan," he said. "Sheriff?" His eyes moved past me into the cabin, and I knew he could see Abigail standing by the table. "Got a visitor, I see." "She's just passing through." "That's so?" He looked at Abigail. "Ma'am, I don't believe we've met. I'm Sheriff Douglas. Mind if I ask your name?" Abigail stepped forward. Her face was calm, blank almost. "Abigail Thorne. And what brings you to Cedar Hollow, Miss Thorne?" "I was under the impression I was coming here to marry Mr. Mercer. It seems there was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" "Yes?" The sheriff looked at me, then back at her. "You got family in town, Miss Thorne?" "No." "Friends?" "No. So you came all this way on your own, just you, for a marriage that, by your own account, isn't happening." "That's correct." He nodded slowly. "Well, I hope you find what you're looking for. Cedar Hollow's a small town. We don't get many strangers. Folks here tend to be curious about new faces, especially when those faces show up unannounced at the home of a man who keeps to himself." It was a warning, subtle but clear. "I appreciate your concern, Sheriff," Abigail said, "but I'm quite capable of taking care of myself." "I'm sure you are. Still, if you need anything, my office is in town, right next to the general store. Can't miss it." "I'll keep that in mind." He tipped his hat to her, then looked at me. "Ethan." A word. Outside. I followed him onto the porch. The rain was light but cold. It soaked into my shirt almost immediately. The sheriff walked a few steps away from the door, out of earshot, and stopped. "What's this about?" I asked. "Vernon Ashford came to see me last night." My stomach tightened. "What did he want?" "He wanted to know if you'd had any visitors recently." I told him no, but then this morning, one of his boys saw a woman riding out toward your place. Vernon's curious. She's nobody, just a woman looking for work. That's not what Vernon thinks. He thinks she's here because of the matrimonial bureau scheme he's been running. So Vernon knew. Of course he knew. He had sent her here. He had planned this. "If she's here because of that," I said carefully, "then Vernon's the one who brought her, not me. I know that. You know that. But Vernon's worried she might start asking questions. Questions about you, about your mother, about the land." "I haven't told her anything." "Good. Keep it that way." He looked back toward the cabin. "Vernon's a patient man, Ethan, but his patience has limits. The railroad's putting pressure on him to finalize the land deals along the route. That includes yours. He's running out of time, which means he's going to start running out of options." "What are you saying?" The sheriff sighed. He looked tired, older than I remembered. "I'm saying if you care about that woman in there, you'll send her away. Today. before Vernon decides she's a problem that needs solving. And if I don't, then I can't protect her, and I can't protect you." He walked back to his horse, mounted, and rode away without looking back. I stood on the porch, watching him go, feeling the rain soak through to my skin. When I went back inside, Abigail was standing by the window, arms crossed, watching me. "He was warning you," she said. "He was warning both of us." "What did he say?" I told her. All of it. Vernon's visit to the sheriff, the matrimonial bureau scheme, the pressure from the railroad, the implication that if Abigail stayed, she would become a target. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "We need to move faster than I thought." "Abigail, you heard what he said. Vernon knows you're here. He's watching. If we do anything, if we make one wrong move, he'll know. Then we won't make a wrong move. That's not how this works. Vernon doesn't play fair. He doesn't give second chances. If he thinks you're a threat, he'll eliminate you, just like he eliminated my mother. I understand the risk." "No, you don't." I stepped closer to her. I watched my mother die. I stood at her grave, and I knew Vernon had killed her, and I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't prove it. I couldn't fight back. I couldn't even grieve properly because I was too busy trying to survive. And now you're standing here, in my house, telling me you're going to help me fight him, but you don't know what that means. You don't know what he's capable of. "You're right," she said quietly. "I don't know what it's like to lose a mother, but I do know what it's like to lose someone I loved and not be able to prove how they died. I know what it's like to live with that, every day, wondering if I could have done something, said something, been smarter or braver or faster. And I know what it's like to run away because I was too afraid to face the man who took that person from me." She looked up at me and her eyes were wet. "I'm not running anymore, Ethan. I can't. If I leave now, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have helped you, if I could have stopped Vernon, and I can't live like that. Not again." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her to pack her bag and ride back to town and get on the first stage out of Cedar Hollow, but I could see it in her face. She had already made up her mind. "All right," I said. "But we do this my way. We stay quiet. We don't go to the sheriff. We don't go to Vernon. We gather everything we can, and when we have enough, we take it straight to the railroad in Austin. No one in Cedar Hollow can know what we're doing." "Agreed. And if Vernon comes for you, if he so much as looks at you wrong, you leave. Immediately. No arguments." "I'll leave if you leave." "Abigail, I mean it. We're in this together now. If you're not safe, I'm not safe, so we either both stay or we both go." I wanted to tell her that was foolish, that she was tying herself to a sinking ship, but I did not have the strength to fight her anymore. "Fine," I said. "Together." She nodded. Then she went to the table and picked up the death certificate. "We need to find out if there is a real Dr. Raymond Colt anywhere in Texas. If there isn't, that's more proof Vernon fabricated this. And if there is, then we find him and ask him if he ever examined a woman named Mary Mercer. My guess is he'll say no." It was a good plan. Simple. Direct. But it required leaving the ranch, going into town, asking questions. And the moment we started asking questions, Vernon would know. "There's someone who might help," I said. "Grace Holloway. She runs a boarding house in town. She's been here longer than anyone. If there's a Dr. Colt in Cedar Hollow, past or present, she'll know. Can we trust her?" "I think so. She's never been friendly with Vernon, and she lost her husband 8 years ago under circumstances that always seemed suspicious to me." "Then let's go see her." We rode into town together, Abigail on her gray mare, me on my bay gelding. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still heavy with clouds. The road was thick with mud. It sucked at the horses' hooves with every step. Cedar Hollow was not much to look at. A main street with maybe a dozen buildings, a general store, a saloon, a church with a crooked steeple, the sheriff's office, and at the far end, Grace Holloway's boarding house, a 2-story structure with peeling paint and a sagging porch. We tied the horses out front and went inside. Grace was behind the counter washing dishes in a tin basin. She was a tall woman, thin as a rail, with gray hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that missed nothing. When she saw me, she stopped washing and straightened up. "Ethan Mercer," she said. "I haven't seen you in town in 6 months." I've been busy. I'm sure you have. She looked at Abigail. And who's this? Abigail Thorne. I hesitated. I'm a friend, Abigail said. Grace's eyes moved between us. I could see her calculating, putting pieces together. Then she set down the dish she had been washing and dried her hands on her apron. A friend, she said. Well, any friend of Ethan's is welcome here. Come, sit. I'll make tea. We sat at a small table near the window. Grace brought out a pot of tea and 3 chipped cups. She poured in silence, then sat down across from us. So, she said, what brings you here? And don't tell me it's a social call because you don't do social calls, Ethan. I glanced at Abigail. She nodded. We need to ask you about a doctor, I said, Dr. Raymond Colt. Have you ever heard that name? Grace frowned. Raymond Colt? No, I don't think so. Why? He signed my mother's death certificate. Her frown deepened. Your mother died 3 years ago. I know. And you're just now asking about the doctor? I never looked at the certificate closely, not until last night. Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Ethan, there's no Dr. Raymond Colt in Cedar Hollow. There never has been. The only doctor we've had in the last 10 years was old Dr. Brennan, and he died 5 years ago. Since then, folks either ride to the next town over, or they do without. So if someone needed a death certificate signed, Abigail said, who would they go to? The sheriff, I suppose. He handles that sort of thing, files it with the county. And if the sheriff wanted to file a false death certificate, could he do it? Grace looked at her sharply. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Abigail said, that Ethan's mother's death certificate was signed by a man who doesn't exist, which means someone forged it. And the only person with a motive to do that is Vernon Ashford. Grace set down her teacup. Her hand was shaking slightly. You're saying Vernon forged a death certificate? We're saying it's possible, I said. We need to know if anyone else has died under strange circumstances in the last 10 years, anyone whose death might have benefited Vernon. Grace stared at me. Then she stood up, walked to the counter, and pulled out a wooden box from underneath. She brought it back to the table and opened it. Inside were papers, letters, clippings from newspapers. My husband Theodore died 8 years ago, she said. The official cause was a heart attack, but I've never believed that. She pulled out a piece of paper. A death certificate. Theodore Holloway, age 56, cause of death, acute myocardial infarction. Examined and certified by Dr. Raymond Colt. Abigail and I looked at each other. Vernon used the same false name, Abigail said. Grace sat down heavily. I always knew something was wrong. Theodore was healthy. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke. And then one night he just died. In the barn, alone. And Vernon swooped in 2 days later with an offer to buy our land. When I said no, he said he'd take it anyway. Through tax liens, legal channels. He made it sound so reasonable, so I sold. What else could I do? She looked at me, and I saw in her eyes the same thing I had been carrying for 3 years. Guilt, rage, helplessness. Vernon's been doing this for years, I said. Killing people, forging death certificates, stealing their land. And getting away with it, Grace said, because no one's been able to prove it. Until now, Abigail said. She laid out the 2 death certificates side by side. Same signature, same false name. If we can find even one more, we have a pattern. And a pattern is proof. Grace looked at the certificates. Then she looked at us. What do you need from me? Information, I said. Anyone else who died under suspicious circumstances. Anyone whose land Vernon wanted. And discretion, Abigail added. Vernon can't know we're looking into this. Grace nodded slowly. I'll ask around, quietly. There are a few people in town who might remember things. People who have their own reasons to hate Vernon. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet. If Vernon finds out what we're doing, we're all dead. We left the boarding house and rode back toward the ranch. The sky had darkened again, and the wind was picking up. It smelled like more rain. Halfway home, Abigail spoke. Grace lost everything because of Vernon, just like you, just like me. Yes. How many others do you think there are? People he's destroyed. People too afraid to speak up. I don't know, too many. We rode in silence after that. When we reached the cabin, I unsaddled the horses and brought them into the small barn. Abigail went inside. By the time I finished, the rain had started again, heavier this time. I walked back to the cabin and stopped. The door was open. I had closed it when we left. I was certain of that. I drew the knife from my belt and stepped inside. Vernon Ashford was sitting at my table. He looked up when I entered, and he smiled. It was a pleasant smile. The kind of smile a man gives when he's won something. "Hello, Ethan," he said. "I hope you don't mind. I let myself in. We need to talk." Vernon Ashford sat at my table, hands folded on the polished surface, perfectly still. The lamplight caught the silver in his hair, made his face look softer than it was. He wore a dark suit, perfectly pressed despite the rain. His hands were pale and clean, the hands of a man who had never dug a hole or buried a secret or worked an honest day in his life. I did not move from the doorway. The knife was still in my hand, low and ready. "Where is she?" I asked. Vernon's smile widened. "The charming Miss Thorne? She's safe. For now. Silas is keeping her company in the barn. He's very good at keeping people company. Very patient. Silas Porter, Vernon's foreman. The man who did the work Vernon's clean hands would never touch. If he hurts her," I said. "He won't, not unless I tell him to. And I won't tell him to, Ethan, as long as you and I can have a civilized conversation." Vernon gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit, please." I stayed where I was. Vernon sighed. "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be. I came here to talk, to offer you a way out. The least you can do is hear me out. I don't want your offers." "No, you never have. Just like your mother. Stubborn to the end." He said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. "But stubbornness only gets you so far, Ethan. Eventually, you run out of road, and I think you're running out of road." I took a step forward. The knife felt good in my hand, solid, real. "Get out of my house. This isn't your house." "Not really, not anymore. The county's been reviewing your tax payments. Turns out there are some discrepancies. Nothing major. Just enough to justify a reassessment. And once that reassessment goes through, well..." He spread his hands. "You won't be able to afford to keep it, but don't worry. I'll make you an offer. A fair one. More than fair, actually. Enough to start over somewhere else. I'm not selling. Everyone sells eventually. It's just a matter of price and timing." Vernon rose slowly from the chair. He was not a tall man, but he carried himself like he was. "Let me tell you what's going to happen, Ethan. You're going to sign the deed over to me, tonight. And in exchange, I'm going to make all of this go away. The tax assessment, the suspicion about your mother's death, Luther Pike's testimony, all of it, gone. You walk away clean, free. You take Miss Thorne with you if you like. Start a new life together. Isn't that what she came here for? A new start. She came here because you lied to her. I gave her an opportunity. What she does with it is her choice." Vernon walked toward me. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Expensive. Foreign. "The same way this is your choice, Ethan. Sign the deed or I'll take it from you anyway. But if I have to take it, Miss Thorne won't be going anywhere, and neither will you, at least not in the way you'd prefer." The threat was clear. Sign or die. Both of us. "I need time to think," I said. "You have until sunrise. I'll be back then. With the papers." Vernon walked past me to the door, then stopped. "Oh, one more thing. I know you went to see Grace Holloway today. I know what you talked about. Death certificates, Dr. Raymond Colt. Very enterprising of you. But Grace is a lonely old woman with too much time and too many grievances. No one will believe her. And even if they did, well, memories fade. Witnesses disappear. You of all people should know that." He opened the door and walked out into the rain. I waited until I heard his horse and another horse behind it, both riding away. Then I ran to the barn. Abigail was sitting on the floor, her back against a stall. Her hands were tied in front of her with rope. There was a bruise forming on her cheek, but she was alive. Her eyes met mine, and I saw anger there, not fear. Anger. I cut the ropes and helped her up. "Are you hurt?" "Just my pride." She rubbed her wrists where the rope had been. "He was waiting inside when I came in. The big one. Silas. He didn't say anything. Just tied me up and sat there watching me until Vernon came out and told him to leave." "Did Vernon touch you?" "No, but his man did, when I tried to fight back." She touched her cheek. "I got one good hit in before he grabbed me. Broke his nose, I think. So that's something. Despite everything, I almost smiled. You broke Silas Porter's nose. Is that impressive? Silas Porter is the kind of man who breaks other people, usually on purpose. Well, now we're even. I led her back to the cabin. Inside, I lit more lamps and checked the door, the windows, the lock that had never been much good to begin with. Then I poured water from the pitcher and handed her a cloth for her face. She sat down at the table, the same chair Vernon had been sitting in, and pressed the cloth to her cheek. He's going to kill us, isn't he? He's going to try. What did he want? I told her. The tax assessment, the offer, the ultimatum, sunrise. When I finished, she set down the cloth. So we have maybe 8 hours. To do what? To find enough evidence to stop him, or to run. I'm not running. Neither am I, so that leaves finding evidence. She looked at me. You said Grace was going to ask around, about other deaths, other forged certificates. We need that information now, tonight. Grace won't have had time to find anything yet. Then we'll help her look. Where does she keep her records? I don't know, the boarding house, I assume. Then that's where we start. I shook my head. Vernon knows we went there. He'll be watching. If we go back tonight, he'll know we're up to something. He already knows we're up to something. He just threatened to kill us, Ethan. We're past the point of being subtle. She stood up. Every minute we sit here is a minute closer to sunrise. And once the sun comes up, Vernon wins. So we either fight now or we die at dawn. Those are the options. She was right. I hated that she was right, but she was. All right, I said, we go to Grace, but we go careful. And if anything feels wrong, we leave. Immediately. Agreed. We rode back to town in the dark. The rain had stopped again, but the clouds were low and heavy, blocking the moon. The only light came from the few windows still lit in Cedar Hollow. Most people were asleep, or pretending to be. Grace's boarding house was dark when we arrived. We tied the horses behind the building, out of sight from the main street, and went to the back door. I knocked quietly. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. The door opened a crack. Grace's face appeared, pale in the darkness. When she saw me, she opened the door wider. Ethan, what are you doing here? It's past midnight. We need your help, now. She looked at Abigail, saw the bruise on her face, and stepped aside. Come in, quickly. We followed her into the kitchen. She lit a lamp and set it on the table. Then she locked the door behind us. What happened? She asked. Vernon, I said. He was waiting at my cabin. He knows we're looking into the death certificates. He knows we talked to you, and he gave me until sunrise to sign over my land or he'll kill us both. Grace eased herself into a chair. I was afraid of this. I've been asking questions all evening, carefully. But word travels fast in a town this small. Did you find anything? I found 3 people willing to talk. 3 deaths in the last 10 years that don't sit right. All of them landowners. All of them on the route Vernon's been planning for the railroad. She rose and went to a cupboard. From the back, behind a stack of plates, she pulled out a leather folder. I've been keeping these for years, ever since Theodore died. I didn't know what to do with them, but I couldn't throw them away. She opened the folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, death notices, and 3 more death certificates, all of them signed by Dr. Raymond Colt. Abigail picked them up one by one, studying each signature. 5 deaths, 5 forged certificates, all signed by the same fictitious doctor. This is a pattern. This is proof. It's proof Vernon's been killing for land for at least 10 years, Grace said. But it's not proof that will hold up in court. Not in Cedar Hollow. The judge here is Vernon's cousin. The jury will be people who owe him money or favors or both. Then we don't take it to court in Cedar Hollow, I said. We take it to Austin, to the federal marshal, to the railroad. Someone who can't be bought. And how do you plan to get there? Grace asked. Vernon will have men watching the roads. The moment you try to leave town, he'll know. She was right. Cedar Hollow was small enough that any movement was noticed. Any stranger remarked upon. Vernon had eyes everywhere. Then we don't leave by road, Abigail said. Is there another way out of town? A back route? Grace thought for a moment. There's the old logging trail, runs east through the hills. It's rough going. No one uses it anymore since the mill closed, but it connects to the main road to Austin about 20 miles out. How long would it take to reach Austin from there? On horseback? 2 days if you push hard, 3 if you don't. 2 days, I said. Vernon will send men after us. Not if he doesn't know we're gone. Abigail looked at Grace. If we leave tonight before sunrise, Vernon will still be waiting for Ethan to show up at the cabin. By the time he realizes we've run, we'll have a head start. A head start isn't enough, Grace said. Vernon has friends all along the road to Austin, men who owe him, men who'll stop you if he sends word. Then we need something he can't ignore, something that forces him to stay in Cedar Hollow instead of chasing us. Abigail turned to me. What does Vernon care about more than your land? I thought about it. Vernon had spent 10 years building his empire in Cedar Hollow, the land deals, the railroad contract. His reputation as a respectable businessman. Everything was built on the illusion of legitimacy. His reputation, I said. If we can damage that, if we can make people in Cedar Hollow question him, he'll have to stay and manage it. He can't afford to have doubt spreading while he's gone. How do we damage his reputation in one night? Grace asked. We tell the truth, Abigail said, to everyone, all at once before he can stop us. Grace shook her head. You can't just walk down Main Street shouting about murder. Vernon will have you arrested before you finish the first sentence. No, but we can do it somewhere he can't reach us, somewhere public, somewhere sacred. Abigail looked at both of us. The church, Sunday service, everyone in town will be there. If we can present the evidence in front of the whole congregation, Vernon can't silence us without revealing himself. Sunday is 3 days away, I said. Then we have 3 days to prepare, and 3 days to stay alive. Vernon won't wait 3 days. He'll come for us tomorrow. Not if he thinks he's already won. Abigail picked up the death certificates. Grace, do you have a safe place to hide these? Somewhere Vernon would never look? Grace thought for a moment. Then she smiled. It was a thin, bitter smile. I have a chicken coop out back, 20 birds. Vernon Ashford has never stepped foot in a chicken coop in his life. He won't start now. Perfect. Hide the certificates there. Wrap them in wax paper to keep them dry. We'll come back for them Sunday morning. Abigail turned to me. And you. Tomorrow morning, when Vernon comes to collect the deed, you're going to give it to him. I stared at her. What? You're going to sign the deed and hand it over, exactly like he wants. Abigail, if I sign that deed, I lose everything. Not if the deed is a forgery. Understanding dawned slowly. You want me to make a fake deed? I want you to make a deed that looks real enough to satisfy Vernon for 3 days, long enough for us to get to Sunday. Once we reveal the truth in front of the whole town, once we show everyone what Vernon's been doing, the deed won't matter. It'll be invalidated anyway. It was risky. If Vernon noticed the forgery, if he looked too closely, it would all fall apart. But it was the only plan we had. I'll need paper, official-looking paper, and a seal. Vernon will expect a county seal. I have both, Grace said. Theodore was a notary before he died. He kept all his supplies. I never got rid of them. She went upstairs and came back with a wooden box. Inside were sheets of thick paper with the county seal printed at the top. A wax stamp. Ink. Everything I would need to create a document that looked legitimate. This might actually work, I said. It has to work, Abigail said, because if it doesn't, we're dead. We worked through the night. I drafted the deed, copying the language from the original as closely as I could remember. Abigail checked every word, making sure the phrasing was correct, that nothing would raise immediate suspicion. Grace melted wax and helped me apply the seal. By the time we finished, the sky outside was beginning to lighten. Dawn was coming. I need to get back to the cabin, I said. Vernon will be there soon. And I'm coming with you, Abigail said. No, it's too dangerous. If something goes wrong, I need you safe. If something goes wrong, we both die anyway. I'm not sitting here waiting for news. We're in this together, remember? I wanted to argue, but I was too tired, and she was too stubborn. Fine, but you stay out of sight. If Vernon sees you, if he suspects anything, run. Don't wait for me, just run. I'll run if you run. Abigail, those are my terms. Grace walked us to the door. Before we left, she put a hand on my arm. Ethan, be careful. Vernon is dangerous when he's winning, but he's even more dangerous when he thinks he might lose. I know. And if this doesn't work, if Sunday doesn't go the way we hope, you need to be ready to disappear. Both of you. I'll help however I can, but you can't stay in Cedar Hollow, not after this. If it doesn't work, I said, there won't be anything left to stay for. We rode back to the cabin as the sun rose. The sky was clear for the first time in days. The air smelled clean and cold. By the time we reached the ranch, my hands were numb from gripping the reins. I told Abigail to hide in the barn. She argued, but eventually agreed. Then I went inside and waited. Vernon arrived exactly at sunrise. He came alone this time, riding a black gelding with a white blaze. He dismounted and tied the horse to the post, then walked to the door and knocked. I opened it. "Ethan," he said, "I trust you've made your decision." "I have." I stepped aside. He came in and looked around, as if checking to make sure I was alone. Then he sat down at the table, in the same chair as before, and folded his hands. "The deed," he said. I picked it up from where I had left it on the table. The forged deed, signed with my name, sealed with the county seal, dated today. It looked perfect, at least I hoped it did. I handed it to him. Vernon took it and read through it slowly. His eyes moved over every line, every word. I could feel my pulse in my throat. If he noticed something wrong, if the language was off or the seal looked suspicious, it would be over. He set the deed down and looked at me. "This wasn't so hard, was it?" I did not answer. "You're doing the right thing, Ethan, starting over, leaving the past behind. It's what your mother would have wanted." The mention of my mother sent a spike of rage through me, but I kept my face blank. "Are we done?" "Almost." Vernon pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat. "One more thing. A receipt, acknowledging that you sold the land to me voluntarily, for a fair price, just a formality, but it protects us both." He slid the paper across the table with a pen. I picked up the pen and signed my name. Another forgery, another lie, built on top of all the others. Vernon took the receipt, folded it, and tucked it back into his coat along with the deed. Then he stood up. "Pleasure doing business with you, Ethan. I'll have the county file this today. You have 1 week to vacate the property. After that, if you're still here, I'll have the sheriff remove you." He walked to the door, opened it, and paused. "Oh, and Miss Thorne, if she's still in town, you might want to tell her to leave as well. Cedar Hollow isn't a good place for outsiders, especially ones who ask too many questions." He smiled, tipped his hat, and left. I stood at the window and watched him ride away. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from the effort of holding myself back, of not reaching for the knife, of not doing something stupid that would get us both killed. When Vernon was out of sight, Abigail came out of the barn. She walked to the cabin and stood beside me. "He believed it?" she asked. "For now." "Good, that gives us 3 days. 3 days to convince an entire town that the man who runs it is a murderer. 3 days to stay alive. 3 days to not make a single mistake." She put her hand on my arm. "We can do this." I looked at her, at the bruise on her face, at the determination in her eyes, at this woman who had ridden into my life on a lie and stayed because she refused to let evil win. "I hope you're right," I said, but I did not believe it, not yet. 3 days, that was all we had. Vernon had the forged deed. He believed he had won, but the moment he tried to file it with the county, the moment anyone looked at it closely, they would see the discrepancies, the missing signatures, the seal that was not quite right. And then he would know. We could not afford to wait for that. Abigail and I spent the first day preparing. We went through every piece of evidence Grace had collected, every death certificate, every newspaper clipping, every scrap of proof that Vernon Ashford had been killing people for their land for 10 years. We organized it, categorized it, created a timeline, 5 deaths, 5 families destroyed, 5 pieces of land that now belong to Vernon, directly or through proxies. Mary Pritchard Mercer, Theodore Holloway, Samuel Brennan, Eliza Cross, James Whitfield. 5 names, 5 lives, 5 murders disguised as accidents or natural causes. By the second day, word had started to spread. Not about the evidence. We had kept that secret. But about the fact that I had sold my land to Vernon. People talked. In a town like Cedar Hollow, there was nothing else to do. Some people said I had been smart to take the deal, that I had gotten out while I still could. Others said I was a coward, that I should have fought, that my mother would have been ashamed. I let them talk. It did not matter what they thought. Not yet. What mattered was Sunday. On the 3rd day, Saturday evening, Abigail and I went back to Grace's boarding house. We needed to go over the plan one more time. Make sure we knew exactly what we were going to say, exactly how we were going to present the evidence, exactly how we were going to survive what came after. Grace let us in through the back door. She had been baking bread. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and yistful. It reminded me of my mother, of Sunday mornings when I was a child, of a time before Vernon Ashford had entered our lives. "Everything ready?" Grace asked. "As ready as it can be," Abigail said. "Do you still have the certificates?" "Safe and sound, wrapped in wax paper, buried under 3 inches of chicken droppings. Vernon Ashford could turn this place upside down and he'd never find them." "Good." Abigail eased herself into a chair at the table. "Tomorrow, during the service, we wait until the sermon is over, right before the final hymn. That's when we stand up. Grace, you go first. You were the first victim. You tell them about Theodore, about how he died, about the forged death certificate." Grace nodded. "And then?" "Then I show the congregation Theodore's certificate. I hold it up. I let them see the signature. Dr. Raymond Colt, a doctor who never existed. And then," I said, "I stand up. I tell them about my mother. I show them her certificate, same signature, same fake doctor." "And we keep going," Abigail said. "One by one. 5 deaths, 5 certificates, 5 families. By the time we're done, everyone in that church will know exactly what Vernon Ashford is." "And then what?" Grace asked. "Vernon will be there. He won't just sit quietly while we accuse him of murder. No, he'll try to stop us. That's why we need witnesses, real witnesses, people who will remember what they saw and heard, people who can testify later when the federal marshal comes." "If the federal marshal comes," I said. "He'll come. Once we send word to Austin, once we send copies of the certificates, once we make enough noise that they can't ignore us." Abigail looked at me. "But you're right. There's a chance Vernon stops us before we finish. There's a chance he has us arrested. Or worse." "There's more than a chance," Grace said quietly. "There's a certainty. Vernon won't let this stand. The moment you start talking, he'll act. And when he does, someone's going to get hurt." The room went quiet. "I know," I said, "but we're out of options. We either do this or we run. And if we run, Vernon wins. He keeps killing. He keeps stealing. And no one ever stops him." "So we don't run," Abigail said. "No, we don't." Grace rose and walked to the stove. She poured 3 cups of coffee and brought them back to the table, setting them down with care. Then she returned to her seat and looked at both of us. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Something I've never told anyone. The night Theodore died, he came to me. Late. He was scared. He said he had heard something. A conversation between Vernon and another man. He didn't know who the other man was. He couldn't see him. But he heard Vernon say, 'Do it the same way you did Mary Pritchard. Make it look natural. I need this land by summer.'" My stomach went cold. Mary Pritchard was my mother's maiden name. "I know. Theodore knew it too. He told me he was going to record what he heard. He had an old Edison cylinder recorder. He used it to practice his sermons. He said he was going to hide the cylinder somewhere safe, and then he was going to go to the sheriff." "But he never made it to the sheriff," Abigail said. "No, he died that night in the barn, and I couldn't find the cylinder. I looked everywhere. I tore that barn apart, but it was gone." "Vernon must have taken it," I said. "Or the man who killed Theodore took it. On Vernon's orders." Grace's hands were shaking. She wrapped them around her coffee cup to steady them. "For 8 years I've lived with the knowledge that my husband tried to do the right thing and died for it. And I've lived with the guilt that I didn't try hard enough to finish what he started." "You couldn't have known," Abigail said. "I should have. I should have fought harder. I should have demanded answers, but I was scared. And I let that fear win." Grace looked at me. "Don't let it win, Ethan. Tomorrow, when you stand up in that church, don't let fear stop you. Speak the truth, no matter what happens. Because if you don't, if you let Vernon silence you, then Theodore died for nothing. Your mother died for nothing. And it will all happen again." "I won't let it happen again," I said. "Promise me." "I promise." Abigail leaned forward. "Grace, this recording Theodore made, you never found it?" "No, I searched for months. Every inch of that barn, every corner of this house. Nothing. Where would Theodore hide something that valuable? Something he knew was dangerous?" Grace thought for a long moment. "Theodore was careful, methodical. If he was going to hide something, he'd put it somewhere Vernon would never think to look, somewhere no one would disturb. "The chicken coop," Abigail said suddenly. Grace blinked. "What?" "You just said Vernon would never step foot in a chicken coop. That's why we're hiding the certificates there. Theodore might have had the same idea." Grace stood up quickly. "The coop's been there for 15 years. I've cleaned it, maintained it, but I've never looked under the floorboards." We went outside together, the three of us, into the cold night air. The chicken coop was a small structure behind the boarding house, weathered wood and a slanted roof. Inside, the hens clucked softly, disturbed by our presence. Grace brought a lamp. I brought a crowbar from her tool shed. We started at the far corner, prying up the floorboards one by one. Dirt and straw and years of accumulated debris fell away. The chickens protested loudly. And then under the third board, wrapped in oilcloth, I found it. A metal cylinder, small, heavy, with Edison's name stamped on the side. Grace took it from my hands with trembling fingers. "Theodore's," she whispered, "after all these years." "Can we play it?" Abigail asked. "We'll need a phonograph. I don't have one here, but the church does. Reverend Moore uses it for special services." "Then tomorrow," Abigail said, "we don't just show them the certificates. We let them hear Vernon's own voice ordering your husband's death. We let them hear Theodore's last words." Grace pressed the cylinder to her chest. "Evidence, real evidence, not just paper. Vernon can deny signatures, claim forgeries, but he can't deny his own voice." "Tomorrow," I said. "We end this tomorrow." We stayed at Grace's boarding house that night. It was too risky to go back to the cabin. Vernon might have men watching, waiting for us to make a mistake. So we slept there, Abigail in one of the guest rooms, me on the floor in the kitchen. I did not sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face. I saw her falling. I saw Vernon smile. I saw the forged deed in his hands. When the sun rose, I was already awake. Sunday morning, the day everything changed. Grace made breakfast. None of us ate much. The food sat heavy in my stomach like stones. After breakfast, we retrieved the death certificates from the chicken coop. Grace washed them carefully, making sure no trace of their hiding place remained. Then we wrapped them in cloth and tucked them, along with the cylinder, into Abigail's bag. The church bell rang at 9. Service started at 9:30. We walked together, Grace in the front, Abigail and I behind her. The streets were full of people heading in the same direction, families, couples, children running ahead of their parents, everyone dressed in their Sunday best. No one looked at us twice. We were just 3 more people going to church. The church was small, white wood, crooked steeple, rows of wooden pews that had been there since before I was born. I had sat in those pews every Sunday as a child. My mother beside me, singing hymns, listening to sermons, believing, in the way children believe, that the world was good and God was watching and everything would be all right. I did not believe that anymore. We took seats in the back row, close to the door, in case we needed to run. The church filled quickly. I saw faces I recognized, families I had known my whole life, people who had come to my mother's funeral and said they were sorry and then gone back to their lives and never spoken of her again. I saw Sheriff Douglas sitting near the front, his hat on the pew beside him, his eyes scanning the room. And I saw Vernon Ashford. He sat in the front row, right side, where he always sat. He wore a black suit. His hair was combed back. He looked like a pillar of the community, a man you could trust, a man who would never hurt anyone. The preacher, Reverend Thomas Moore, stood at the pulpit and began the service. He was an old man, thin and bent, with a voice that shook when he spoke. He talked about forgiveness, about letting go of anger, about trusting in God's plan. I stopped listening. Abigail's hand found mine. She squeezed it once. A reminder. We're in this together. The sermon ended. The congregation stood for the final hymn. Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound. This was it. I looked at Grace. She nodded. We stood up. Grace spoke first. Her voice was quiet at first, but it carried in the silence after the hymn ended. I have something to say. Every head in the church turned toward her. Reverend Moore looked confused. Sister Holloway, the service is over. If you have an announcement, perhaps after... No, it needs to be now. It needs to be in front of everyone. Vernon turned in his seat. He looked at Grace, then at me, then at Abigail. I saw the moment he understood. 8 years ago, Grace said, my husband Theodore died. The official cause was a heart attack, but I know he was murdered. And I know who killed him. The church erupted. People turned to each other. Whispers filled the air. Reverend Moore raised his hands. Sister Holloway, please. These are serious accusations. If you have evidence, you should take it to the sheriff. The sheriff won't help me, because the man who killed my husband owns the sheriff, just like he owns half this town. That's enough. Vernon stood up. His voice was calm, controlled. Grace, I understand you're still grieving, but making wild accusations in church is not the way to... I have proof. Grace pulled out Theodore's death certificate and held it up. This is my husband's death certificate, signed by a doctor named Raymond Colt. Does anyone here know Dr. Raymond Colt? Silence. That's because he doesn't exist. He never existed. The death certificate is a forgery. Vernon's face did not change, but I saw his jaw tighten. That's absurd. You're upset. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 8 years. Grace looked at the congregation. Vernon Ashford has been killing people in this town for land, and he's been getting away with it because he controls the people who are supposed to stop him. Samuel Brennan, Eliza Cross, James Whitfield. All dead under suspicious circumstances, all with land Vernon wanted, and all with death certificates signed by the same fake doctor. At the mention of James Whitfield's name, I saw a woman in the middle pews stiffen. She was older, thin, with gray hair and work-worn hands. Her face had gone pale. Grace saw her too. James Whitfield's mother, Martha, still lives here. She works as a housekeeper. She's been waiting, watching, for 8 years, waiting for someone to finally speak the truth about what happened to her son. The woman, Martha, met Grace's eyes. There was something there, recognition, gratitude, and something harder, something that looked like patience finally rewarded. That's a lie, Vernon said, but his voice had an edge now, sharp and cold. I stood up. It's not a lie. Every eye in the church turned to me. My mother died 3 years ago. The official cause was a fall, but I know she was murdered, and I know who killed her. I pulled out her death certificate. Same doctor, same signature, same forgery. Vernon's eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment I saw it. The mask slipping, the careful control cracking. He knew he was losing. Ethan Mercer, he said slowly, you are making a very serious mistake. The only mistake I made was staying silent for 3 years. Abigail stood up beside me. She held up the other 3 death certificates. Samuel Brennan, Eliza Cross, James Whitfield, 5 people dead in 10 years, 5 forged death certificates, all signed by the same fake doctor, all connected to land that Vernon Ashford wanted. This is ridiculous, Vernon said. But he was looking at the sheriff now. Douglas, arrest them. They're disturbing the peace, making false accusations. Sheriff Douglas did not move. Douglas, Vernon said again, sharper this time. The sheriff rose slowly from his seat. He looked at Vernon, then at me, then at the death certificates in Abigail's hands. I need to see those certificates, he said. Abigail walked down the aisle and handed them to him. The sheriff read through them one by one. His face went pale. When he finished, he looked at Vernon. Did you forge these? Of course not. This is a setup. They're trying to frame me. Then you won't mind if I send these to the county for verification, to make sure Dr. Raymond Colt is a real licensed physician. Vernon's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake, Douglas. Maybe, but I'd rather make a mistake than ignore this. The sheriff turned to the congregation. I'm going to need everyone to stay calm. I'm taking these certificates to the county office in Austin. I'll be back in 3 days with answers. Until then, no one leaves Cedar Hollow. Especially you, Vernon. You have no authority to hold me. I have every authority. 5 suspicious deaths, 5 forged documents. That's enough to open an investigation. The sheriff looked at me. Ethan, Miss Thorne, you'll need to come with me. I'll need your statements. Wait, Grace said. She walked to the front of the church carrying the cylinder. There's one more thing. Something Vernon needs to hear. Something everyone needs to hear. She handed the cylinder to Reverend Moore. This is a recording my husband Theodore made the night he died. He recorded a conversation he overheard, a conversation about murder. Reverend Moore looked at the cylinder, then at Grace. "Are you certain you want to do this? Here? Now? I've waited 8 years. I'm not waiting any more." The Reverend nodded slowly. He walked to the side of the church where the phonograph sat on a small table. He placed the cylinder on the mechanism and wound the crank. The church went silent. And then, through the scratchy hiss of the recording, we heard Theodore Holloway's voice. "May 14th, 1871, 9:40 at night. I'm recording this because I'm afraid. Tonight I heard something. I was walking past the old mill. I heard voices. I recognized one of them, Vernon Ashford. He was talking to another man. I couldn't see who, but I heard what they said." There was a pause on the recording, the sound of breathing, fear. Then Theodore's voice continued. "Vernon said, 'Do it the same way you did Mary Pritchard. Make it look natural. I need this land by summer. And Theodore Holloway's in my way. Make it look like his heart gave out. He's old enough. No one will question it.' And the other man said, 'Same fee as before.' And Vernon said, 'Double. I need it done this week.'" Theodore's voice was shaking now. "I'm going to hide this recording. And tomorrow I'm going to the sheriff. This has to stop. Vernon's been killing people for years. And I have proof now. The recording cut off. The church was silent. Every person frozen, staring at the phonograph as if it might speak again. Then slowly every eye turned to Vernon Ashford. Vernon stood very still. Then he smiled. It was the same smile he had given me in my cabin, the smile of a man who had won. "Fine," he said. "Investigate. You'll find nothing, because there's nothing to find. These accusations are baseless. And when this is over, when you've wasted everyone's time, I'll make sure everyone in this town knows who the real liars are." He walked out of the church, calm, controlled, like nothing had happened. But I knew better. Vernon Ashford was not the kind of man who lost gracefully, and we had just humiliated him in front of the entire town. He would come for us. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And when he did, he would not be offering deals anymore. That evening, Sheriff Douglas sat alone in his office, the death certificate spread before him on the desk. The lamp burned low. Outside, Cedar Hollow had gone quiet. Everyone was home, talking about what had happened in the church, talking about Vernon Ashford, talking about murder. He had served this town for 30 years, had worn this badge with pride once, had believed in justice, in the law, in doing right by people. And he had taken Vernon Ashford's money for 20 of those years. The sheriff picked up Mary Mercer's death certificate. Read the signature. Dr. Raymond Colt. A name he had never questioned. A name he had filed away without a second thought because Vernon had told him to. He set it down, picked up Theodore Holloway's, same signature, same lie. 5 certificates, 5 people dead, 5 families destroyed. And he had looked the other way, every single time. The sheriff poured himself a whiskey from the bottle he kept in the desk drawer. His hands shook as he lifted the glass. He thought about his wife, Martha, about his grandchildren who would visit next month. What would they think of him if they knew? What would Martha say if she understood that the money that bought their house, that paid for the grandchildren's school books, had come from a man who killed people for land? He drained the whiskey, poured another. When had it started? When had he stopped being a lawman and become Vernon's errand boy? He could not remember the exact moment. It had been gradual, a favor here, a blind eye there, a little money to supplement his salary, small compromises that grew into something he could no longer recognize. The sheriff looked at his reflection in the window, an old man, tired, corrupt, but not dead yet, not beyond saving. He stood up, put on his hat, buckled his gun belt. Outside he saddled his horse. The night was cold and clear. Stars overhead. The kind of night that made you believe in something bigger than yourself. He was going to Austin, and for the first time in 20 years, he was going to do his job the way it was meant to be done. Even if it cost him everything, even if Vernon destroyed him for it, even if he lost his position, his pension, his reputation. Because 5 people were dead, and their families deserved the truth. Sheriff Douglas rode out of Cedar Hollow as the moon rose. He did not look back. The sheriff took our statements in the back room of the church, one by one. Grace first, then me, then Abigail. He wrote everything down in a leather notebook, his pen scratching across the paper in the quiet room. Outside, I could hear the congregation dispersing, voices raised in speculation, footsteps on the wooden stairs, the sound of a town trying to make sense of what it had just witnessed. When we finished, the sheriff closed his notebook and looked at the three of us. "I'm leaving for Austin in an hour," he said. "I'll take the certificates to the federal marshal's office. They'll need to verify the forgeries. Check if Dr. Raymond Colt exists anywhere in Texas. That'll take at least 2 days, maybe 3. "And Vernon?" I asked. "I can't arrest him without proof, not yet, but I told him to stay in Cedar Hollow. If he runs, that's as good as a confession." The sheriff stood up. "You three need to be careful. Vernon's not stupid. He knows what this means. He knows if those certificates are confirmed as forgeries, he's looking at murder charges, multiple counts. He'll hang. So he'll try to stop the investigation," Abigail said. "Or he'll try to stop you. You're the witnesses. Without you, this whole thing falls apart." The sheriff looked at me. "Ethan, you should stay at Grace's boarding house. Don't go back to your cabin. Don't go anywhere alone. And keep that knife of yours close. I'm not hiding. I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to stay alive long enough for justice to work." He picked up the certificates and the cylinder, tucking them into a leather satchel. 3 days, that's all I need. Can you give me 3 days?" "We'll try," I said. The sheriff left through the back door. We waited until his horse was out of sight, then walked back to Grace's boarding house. The streets were quieter now. Most people had gone home, but I could feel eyes watching us from windows, could feel the weight of the town's attention settling on our shoulders. At Grace's, we locked the doors and closed the curtains. Grace made tea that none of us drank. We sat in the kitchen, listening to the clock tick, waiting for something to happen. It did not take long. Just after sunset, we heard horses, multiple horses, moving fast down the main street. They stopped outside the boarding house. Heavy boots on the wooden steps, then a fist pounding on the door. "Grace Holloway, open up." It was not Vernon's voice. It was deeper, rougher. I recognized it. "Silas Porter." Grace stood up. "Don't answer it." "He knows we're in here," I said. The pounding came again, harder this time. "I'm not leaving until you open this door. You can do it the easy way, or I can kick it in. Your choice." I walked to the door. Abigail grabbed my arm. "Don't," she said. "If he kicks the door in, he'll have an excuse to come inside, to search the place, maybe find something he can use against us." I looked at Grace. "Do you have anything here he shouldn't see?" "No, I hid everything." I unlocked the door and opened it. Silas Porter stood on the porch. He was a big man, broad across the shoulders, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and left unfinished. His nose was swollen and purple. Broken, just like Abigail had said. Behind him stood 2 other men I did not recognize. Hired guns, probably. Men who did the kind of work that required not asking questions. "Ethan Mercer," Silas said. "Vernon wants to see you." "Tell Vernon I'm busy." "Wasn't a request." Silas stepped forward. "You embarrassed him today, in front of the whole town. Made him look like a fool, like a criminal. He wants a chance to explain his side, face to face. His side is a lie. Maybe, maybe not. But you owe him the courtesy of listening. I don't owe Vernon Ashford anything." Silas's hand moved to his belt. I saw the gun there, saw his fingers brush the handle. A reminder of what could happen if I did not cooperate. "Here's what's going to happen," Silas said. "You're going to come with me. We're going to have a conversation with Vernon, a civilized conversation. And then, if everything goes well, you get to come back here. If it doesn't go well, that's up to you. And if I refuse, then I'd drag you out. And your lady friend and the old woman, too. Is that what you want?" I looked back at Abigail. She was standing now, her hand on the kitchen table, ready to move, ready to fight. But I could see the fear in her eyes, not for herself, for me. "I'll go," I said, "but they stay here." "Fine, they stay for now." Silas stepped back. "Let's go." I followed him off the porch. One of the hired guns brought a horse forward. They put me on it, hands untied, but with Silas riding close beside me. Close enough that if I tried to run, he could grab me before I made it 10 feet. We rode through town, past the church, past the general store, past the saloon where men stood in the doorway watching us pass. No one said anything. No one tried to stop us. Vernon's house was at the edge of Cedar Hollow. It was the largest building in town. 2 stories, white wood, a wraparound porch, gardens in the front. It looked like the house of a man who had made something of himself, a man who had worked hard and earned his success. It looked like a lie. Silas dismounted and gestured for me to do the same. We walked up the steps to the front door. He knocked once, then opened it without waiting for an answer. Inside, the house was exactly what I expected. Rich furniture, thick carpets, paintings on the walls, everything expensive, everything designed to impress, to make you feel small. Vernon was waiting in the study. He sat behind a large desk, a glass of whiskey in his hand. When we entered, he stood up and smiled. "Ethan, thank you for coming. Please sit." There was a chair in front of the desk. I sat. Silas stood behind me, close enough that I could feel his presence. A silent threat. Vernon took a sip of his whiskey. That was quite a performance today, in the church. Very dramatic, very emotional. I almost believed it myself. I did not answer. "You've put me in a difficult position," Vernon continued. "The sheriff is on his way to Austin with those death certificates. He's going to verify them, and when he does, when he discovers that Dr. Raymond Colt doesn't exist, he's going to come back here with questions I can't easily answer. Because you forged those certificates. Because someone forged those certificates, and I'm very curious to know who." Vernon set down his glass. "Here's what I think happened. I think Grace Holloway, in her grief and anger, created false documents to frame me. I think she convinced you and Miss Thorne to help her. And I think the 3 of you staged that scene in the church to ruin my reputation. That's not what happened. Isn't it? Think about it, Ethan. Who has more reason to lie? Me, a respected businessman who has lived in this town for 15 years? Or you, a man suspected of killing his own mother, a man who has been sitting on that land for 3 years, refusing to sell, refusing to move on? You killed my mother." "I did no such thing. Your mother died in a tragic accident. The sheriff investigated. The doctor signed the certificate. Everything was done properly. The doctor doesn't exist. Or perhaps the doctor does exist and you simply can't find him. Perhaps Dr. Raymond Colt moved away, retired, died. There are many explanations that don't involve murder and conspiracy." I stood up. "I'm done listening to this." Silas's hand clamped down on my shoulder, hard, pushing me back into the chair. "Sit down, Ethan. We're not finished." Vernon leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to Grace's boarding house. You're going to tell her and Miss Thorne that you've reconsidered, that you've realized how foolish this accusation is, and tomorrow morning, the 3 of you are going to go to the sheriff's office and withdraw your statements. No, if you don't, I will make your life very difficult, more difficult than it already is. I will file charges against you for fraud, for defamation, for trespassing on land that no longer belongs to you. I will make sure you spend the rest of your miserable life in prison or on the run. You can't do that. I can do whatever I want, because unlike you, I have friends, I have money, I have power." Vernon stood up. "You should have taken my offer 3 days ago, Ethan. You should have signed the real deed and left. But you got greedy. You thought you could fight me. You thought you could win." He walked around the desk and stood in front of me. "Let me make this very clear. You will not win. You cannot win. The only question is how much you're going to suffer before you accept that." "I'd rather suffer than give you what you want." Vernon smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." He nodded to Silas. Silas grabbed me by the arms and hauled me out of the chair. The 2 hired guns moved in. One of them opened a door at the back of the study, stone steps leading down. A cellar. They dragged me down the stairs. The cellar was dark and cold, dirt floor, stone walls, a single lamp hanging from a hook. In the corner I saw a wooden chair, ropes. They threw me into the chair and tied my hands behind my back, my ankles to the legs of the chair. The ropes were tight, too tight. I could already feel my hands going numb. Vernon came down the stairs slowly. He was still holding his whiskey glass. "I'm going to give you one more chance, Ethan. Withdraw your statement. Convince Grace and Abigail to do the same. Do that and I'll let you go. You can leave Cedar Hollow tonight. I'll even give you money for the road." "No," Vernon sighed. Then we do this the hard way. He looked at Silas. Make him understand. Silas stepped forward. The first blow sent my head snapping back. Then another, and another. I lost track of time, lost track of everything except the pain in Vernon's voice, calm and steady, telling me this was my choice. The air rushed out of my lungs. I gasped, trying to breathe, but the pain was too sharp. Vernon watched. He took another sip of whiskey. This can stop any time you want, Ethan. Just say the word. I spat blood onto the dirt floor. Go to hell! Silas hit me again. And again. I lost count after the fifth blow. The world became pain and darkness, and the sound of Vernon's voice, calm and steady, telling me this was my choice, that I was doing this to myself. I do not know how long it lasted. Minutes, hours, time stopped meaning anything. And then through the haze of pain I heard something. Footsteps on the stairs. A new voice. Boss, we got a problem. Silas stopped. Vernon turned. One of the hired guns stood at the bottom of the stairs. There's a fire. In town. Big one. Looks like it's spreading. Vernon's face went pale. Where? The boarding house. Grace Holloway's place. My heart stopped. Abigail. Vernon looked at me, then at Silas. Watch him. I'll be back. He ran up the stairs. The hired guns followed. Silas stayed behind, standing in the corner, watching me with those cold, flat eyes. I pulled against the ropes. They did not give. My hands were useless. Numb. But I kept pulling. Kept trying. Stop struggling, Silas said. You're just making it worse. They're going to die because of him. Maybe, probably. But that's not my problem. You're helping him. You're part of this. I do what I'm paid to do. You killed my mother. Silas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Yeah, I did. The admission hit me harder than his fists. Vernon told me to make it look like an accident, so I cut the reins on her horse, waited until she was riding along the ravine, spooked the horse with a gunshot. She went over, broke her neck. He said it the way another man might describe fixing a fence. Matter of fact, no emotion. It was quick. She didn't suffer. You're a monster. I'm a man who does a job, same as anyone. Silas walked over to me. You want to know something funny? Vernon's planning to kill me too. I found a letter. He's already got my replacement lined up. Someone younger, someone who doesn't know as much, because I know too much. I've done too much, and eventually that makes me a liability. Then help me stop him. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, you're a dead man, same as me, same as everyone Vernon's ever used. Silas stared at me for a long moment. I saw something shift in his eyes, not pity, not quite guilt, something heavier. I have a daughter, he said suddenly, back in Kansas. Haven't seen her in 12 years. Her mother left me when she found out what I did for a living, took the girl with her. He pulled a knife from his belt, but did not move toward me yet. I used to tell myself it didn't matter, that I was just doing a job, that men like Vernon existed, and someone had to do the dirty work. The knife trembled in his hand. But then I found that letter, my name on Vernon's list, and I realized I'm not special, I'm not protected. I'm just another obstacle he'll remove when it's convenient. He stepped closer. I tensed, expecting the blade, but instead he knelt down and cut the first rope, binding my wrists. Your mother's face. I see it every night, every single night for 3 years. Another rope fell away. I can't bring her back. I can't undo what I did, but maybe, his voice cracked, maybe I can stop being the man who did it. He cut the ropes on my ankles. You got one chance, he said. Get out of here. Get to that boarding house. Stop that fire. Save your people. Why are you doing this? Because I'm tired of being Vernon's dog, and because your mother didn't deserve what I did to her. He stood up. Now go, before I change my mind. I stood up. My legs nearly gave out. My ribs screamed, but I forced myself to move. I ran up the stairs, through the study, out the front door. The sky was orange with firelight. I could see the smoke rising from the center of town, thick and black. I ran toward it, every step agony, my vision blurring. The boarding house was an inferno. Flames poured from the windows. The roof was already caving in. People stood in the street watching, doing nothing. No one was trying to put it out. No one was trying to save whoever might be inside. I pushed through the crowd. Where's Grace? Where's Abigail? No one answered. I ran toward the front door. The heat hit me like a wall. I covered my face with my arm and tried to get closer, but the flames were too intense. "Ethan!" I turned. Abigail was standing across the street, alive, unburned. Grace was beside her, holding a blanket around her shoulders. I ran to them, grabbed Abigail, held her. "I thought you were inside," I said. We got out, we smelled the smoke, we ran. She pulled back and looked at me. "Your face. What did he do to you?" "Vernon, he had Silas beat me, tried to make me recant." "And did you?" "No." She touched my face gently. "Of course you didn't." Grace was staring at the burning building. Everything I had was in there, every record, every memory. Theodore's things, all of it, gone. "Vernon did this," I said, "to destroy evidence, to destroy you." "He didn't destroy me." Grace's voice was hard, cold. "He just made me angrier." Vernon appeared at the edge of the crowd. He looked at the fire, then at us. He did not smile, did not gloat. He just looked at me, and I saw the message in his eyes. "This is what happens when you fight me." The sheriff's deputy, a young man named Thomas Reed, came running up. "The bucket brigade's forming. We need everyone who can carry water." People moved, slowly at first, then faster. Buckets appeared, a line formed from the well to the fire. It was too late to save the building, but maybe they could stop it from spreading to the rest of the town. I joined the line. So did Abigail. So did Grace. We passed buckets until our arms ached, until the smoke filled our lungs, until the fire finally died to embers. By the time it was over, the sun was rising. The boarding house was gone, just a blackened skeleton, ash and charred wood. Grace stood looking at the ruins. "I built that place with Theodore. 30 years ago, it was all I had left of him." "We'll build it again," I said. "With what? I have nothing. No money, no home, no proof." "We have each other," Abigail said, "and we have the truth. Vernon can burn buildings, but he can't burn what we know. What we know isn't enough. We need those death certificates, and the sheriff has them. He's in Austin. He won't be back for 2 more days." "Then we wait 2 more days," I said. "Vernon won't wait. You saw what he did tonight. He'll kill us before the sheriff gets back." "Not if we get to him first," a voice said behind us. We turned. Silas Porter stood there. His face was swollen from where Abigail had broken his nose. His hands were empty. No gun, no knife. "What do you want?" I asked. "To help, if you'll let me." "Why would we trust you?" Abigail said. "You work for Vernon. You killed Ethan's mother." "I did, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life, however long that is." Silas looked at me. "Vernon's planning to kill you all tonight. He's hiring men from the next town over, professionals, not men like me who ask questions, men who just do the job and move on." "How many men?" 4, maybe 5. They'll come after dark. They'll make it look like an accident. A robbery gone wrong, bodies in the ashes." Silas paused. "I can't stop what I did to your mother, but I can stop this, if you'll let me." I looked at Abigail, then at Grace. Both of them were watching me, waiting for my decision. "What's your plan?" I asked Silas. "We don't wait for Vernon to come to us. We go to him, tonight, before his hired guns arrive. We end this." "How?" "I know where Vernon keeps his real records, the ones he doesn't want anyone to see, land deals, payoffs, bribes, everything he's done for the last 15 years. It's all in a safe in his study. If we can get those records, we have proof, real proof, the kind even a bought judge can't ignore." "And you know the combination to this safe?" Abigail asked. "No, but I know someone who does. Vernon's housekeeper, woman named Martha Cole. She's worked for him for 10 years. She hates him. He treats her like dirt, pays her almost nothing. If we can convince her to help us, she'll open that safe." It was risky, going into Vernon's house, stealing documents, but it was the only plan we had. "All right," I said, "we do it tonight." We spent the day preparing. Silas left to find Martha Cole, the housekeeper. Grace went to the church to ask Reverend Moore if we could shelter there, somewhere Vernon would not look. Abigail and I stayed together, moving from building to building, keeping out of sight. By nightfall, we had a plan. Silas met us behind the church just after sunset. With him was a woman in her 50s, thin and nervous, with work-worn hands and eyes that would not meet ours. "This is Martha," Silas said. "She's going to help us." Martha looked at me. "Is it true, what they're saying about Mr. Ashford, that he's been killing people?" "It's true," I said. "I always knew he was a bad man, but I didn't know he was evil." She pulled a key from her pocket. "This opens the back door, the servant's entrance. The safe is in the study." Second floor. I'll show you where." "And the combination?" Abigail asked. "I don't know it, but I know where he keeps it written down, in a ledger, in the desk drawer." It was not much, but it was something. "Martha," Grace said gently, "why are you helping us? After what Vernon did?" Martha's face hardened. "My son. James Whitfield. Vernon killed him 5 years ago for his land. I've been working in that house ever since, cooking his meals, cleaning his floors, watching, waiting for someone to finally stand up to him. I couldn't do it alone, but now," she looked at all of us, "now I can." Grace reached out and took Martha's hand. "Grace mentioned you in the church. She said you were waiting, watching." "I've been waiting 5 years," Martha said. 5 years of cooking for the man who murdered my boy. 5 years of smiling and nodding while he ate the food I made, wondering every single day if I should just poison it and be done. But I knew that wouldn't be justice. That would just be revenge. And revenge dies with you. Justice lives on. Her voice was steady now, strong. So I waited, and I watched, and I kept every letter, every receipt, every scrap of paper that might one day hang him. And today, in that church, when Grace spoke up, I knew the waiting was over. We waited until full dark. Then we moved, the 5 of us, me, Abigail, Grace, Silas, and Martha. We crossed through the back streets of Cedar Hollow, staying in the shadows, avoiding the main road. Vernon's house loomed ahead. Most of the windows were dark, but I could see light in the study. Second floor. He was still awake. Martha led us to the back door. She used the key. The door opened silently. We slipped inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. We moved through the kitchen, down a hallway, to the stairs. Martha pointed up. "The study is at the end of the hall. 3rd door on the right. The safe is behind a painting, a landscape, mountains, and a river." "Where's Vernon?" I whispered. "In the study. He works late most nights." "Then we'll have to get him out." Silas looked at me. "I'll do it. I'll knock on the door. Tell him there's a problem in town. Something he needs to see. While he's gone, you get into the safe. And if he doesn't leave, then we improvise." It was not a good plan, but it was all we had. Silas went up the stairs. The rest of us waited in the hallway below. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, could feel Abigail's hand in mine, gripping tight. Above us, Silas knocked on the study door. A pause, then Vernon's voice. "What is it?" "Fire, down by the saloon, spreading fast. They need you." Another pause, longer this time. Then the door opened, footsteps. Vernon's voice, angry now. "This better not be another false alarm." "It's not, I saw it myself." The footsteps moved down the hall, down the stairs. Vernon appeared at the bottom, pulling on his coat. He looked at us standing there. For a moment, no one moved. Then Vernon's hand went to his pocket. He pulled out a small pistol. "I should have known," he said. "Silas, you disappoint me." "I'm done disappointing you," Silas said. "I'm done with all of it." Vernon raised the gun, pointed it at Silas. "Then you're done. Period." The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. But it was not Vernon who fired. It was Martha. She had pulled a pistol from her apron. Old, small, but functional. The bullet caught Vernon in the shoulder. He spun, dropping his gun, clutching the wound. "You bitch," he hissed. "My son," Martha said. Her voice was shaking. "James Whitfield. You killed him 5 years ago, for his land. I've been waiting 5 years, cooking your meals, cleaning your house, watching for the right moment. And now it's here." Vernon stared at her. "James Whitfield was your son?" "He was, and you took him from me." Tears streamed down her face. "I've cooked every meal you've eaten for 5 years, every single one, and every time I set the plate in front of you, I thought about poison, about justice, about my boy." She raised the gun again. Silas grabbed her arm. "No, not like this. He needs to face justice, real justice. There's no justice for men like him." "There is now." Silas looked at Vernon, then at me. "We need to secure him, keep him from running or calling for help." I found rope in the kitchen. We tied Vernon to a chair, his hands behind his back, his ankles bound tight. Silas gagged him with a strip of cloth. "If you call for help, if you try to get out," Silas said quietly, "I'll tell everyone about the safe, about what's inside. And then you won't just face murder charges. You'll face everything." Vernon's eyes blazed with fury, but he could not speak. Someone needs to check on him periodically, I said. Make sure he doesn't work free of the ropes. I'll stay, Martha said. I've waited 5 years. I can wait a few more hours. We left her there, keeping watch over the man who had killed her son. Then we went upstairs to the study. Inside I found the painting. Mountains and a river. I pulled it down. Behind it was a safe, black iron, combination lock. Open it, I said to Silas. He moved to the desk and opened the drawer. Inside was a ledger, leather-bound, old. He flipped through the pages until he found what he was looking for, a series of numbers written in Vernon's hand. He turned the dial, left, right, left again. Click. The safe opened. Inside were papers, stacks of them, deeds, contracts, letters, bank records, everything Vernon had done, every life he had ruined, every crime he had committed. Abigail gathered them carefully. She looked through each one, her face growing paler with every page. This is everything, she said. Land deals with forged signatures, payments to the sheriff, bribes to the county clerk, and letters. Letters from Vernon to Silas, instructions on how to kill people, make it look like accidents. She held up one letter. It was dated 3 years ago, October. Mary Pritchard Mercer. Make it quick. No witnesses. Usual fee. I took the letter from her hands. Read it. Read my mother's name in Vernon's handwriting. Read the order for her death like it was a business transaction. Something broke inside me. I turned and went down the stairs. Vernon was still tied to the chair, Martha standing guard. I walked up to him and pulled down the gag. You killed her for land, I said. For money, for nothing. I killed her because she was in my way. Same reason I killed all of them, because they were obstacles, and I remove obstacles. You're a monster. I'm a businessman. There's a difference. I lunged at him. My fist went back. I was going to hit him, going to break him, going to make him feel even a fraction of the pain I had carried for 3 years. But Abigail caught my arm. Don't, she said. He's not worth it. He killed my mother. I know, and he'll hang for it, but not like this, not with your hands. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I let her pull me back, let Vernon sit there bleeding, bound to his chair. We have what we need, Abigail said. Let's go. We gathered the documents, all of them. We left Vernon sitting there, gagged again, Martha watching over him with her pistol. Outside, the streets were empty. We walked together toward the church. Reverend Moore was waiting. He looked at the blood on our hands, at the documents we carried, at the state of all of us. Is it done? He asked. It's done, I said. Then we wait for the sheriff. We waited 2 days, sheltering in the church, taking turns keeping watch, sleeping in the pews, eating what food people brought us once word spread about what we had found. On the 3rd day, the sheriff returned. He came with 2 federal marshals, hard-looking men with badges and authority that did not answer to anyone in Cedar Hollow. They listened to our story. They read the documents, they examined the death certificates, and played Theodore's recording. Then they went to Vernon's house. They found him still tied to the chair, his shoulder wound, festered, and infected, Martha Cole sitting beside him with her pistol in her lap. He was feverish, delirious. When they untied him and carried him out, he was ranting about empires and railroads and people who did not know their place. They arrested Vernon Ashford. The trial was held in Austin, federal court. Vernon tried to fight, hired lawyers from back east, tried to claim the documents were forgeries, that we had framed him, that the recording was faked. But the evidence was overwhelming. 5 forged death certificates, Theodore's cylinder with Vernon's voice ordering murders, letters ordering killings, bank records showing bribes, land deeds with forged signatures, and testimony. From me, from Grace, from Abigail, from Silas Porter, who gave a full confession, names, dates, details. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty. 5 counts of murder, multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, forgery. The judge sentenced Vernon Ashford to hang. Vernon Ashford was executed 6 weeks after the trial. I did not attend. I could not bear to watch, even after everything he had done. Abigail told me later that he went without speaking, without looking at anyone, that it was quick. I thought I would feel something. Relief, vindication, the weight lifting from my chest. But all I felt was the absence of anger, and in its place a quiet that had no name. Afterward, Abigail found me standing alone near the courthouse. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I don't know. I thought this would fix things, make things right. But my mother is still dead. Grace's husband is still dead. Martha's son is still dead. Vernon hanging doesn't bring any of them back." "No, but it stops him from taking anyone else." She took my hand. "That has to mean something." "Does it?" "It does to me. Because if you hadn't fought, if you hadn't spoken up in that church, if you had signed that deed and walked away 3 years ago, Vernon would still be killing people, still destroying families. Your mother's death would have been for nothing. It feels like it was for nothing. It wasn't. She fought, you fought, and because of that, Vernon lost. Evil lost. That matters, Ethan, even if it doesn't feel like it right now." I looked at her, at this woman who had ridden into my life on a lie and stayed because she believed in truth, who had risked everything to help me fight a man she had never met, who had stood beside me when I had nothing to offer her but danger and pain. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we live, we build, we start over. Together?" She smiled. "If you'll have me. I never ordered a mail-order bride." "I know, but maybe I was meant to arrive anyway." 6 months later, Grace reopened her boarding house. We helped her rebuild it. The whole town did. It was bigger than before. Better. And above the door, carved into a wooden sign, were the words Holloway House, in memory of Theodore. Martha Cole moved into one of the rooms. She worked the front desk, greeted guests, smiled more than she had in years. She kept a photograph of her son James on the counter where everyone could see it, where his memory could live. Silas Porter went to prison, 20 years. He wrote to me once, a short letter, asking not for forgiveness, but for understanding. I wrote back. I told him I understood, that what he did was wrong, but what he did at the end mattered, that I hoped he found peace. I never heard from him again. The land, my land, I kept it. The railroad came through eventually, but they rerouted around Cedar Hollow. Turned out Vernon's deal with them had been another lie. They never wanted the land that badly. They just wanted a reasonable price, which I gave them, for the easement, not the land. I used the money to build a house, bigger than the cabin, room for a family. Abigail and I were married in the church where we had first stood up to Vernon. Reverend Moore performed the ceremony. Grace cried. So did Martha. A year after that, our daughter was born. We named her Mary, after my mother, after the woman whose death had started all of this, whose courage had inspired me to finally fight back. I visit my mother's grave every Sunday. I bring flowers. I tell her about her granddaughter, about how Cedar Hollow is different now, how people are not afraid anymore, how they speak up when things are wrong. And I tell her that I am sorry. Sorry it took me 3 years. Sorry I was too afraid. Sorry she died alone. But mostly I tell her thank you. Thank you for fighting when I could not. Thank you for leaving me that letter. Thank you for showing me that silence protects the guilty, that speaking truth, even when it costs everything, is the only way to live free. Abigail sits beside me sometimes, holding Mary, watching the sunset over the prairie. "Do you ever regret it?" she asks. "Coming here, getting tangled up in all of this." "Every day," I say, "but I would do it again, all of it, because it brought me to you. I was supposed to be your mail-order bride. You were supposed to be a lot of things, a victim, a pawn in Vernon's game, but you refused to be any of that. So did you." I look at my mother's grave, at the simple stone marker, at her name carved into granite. We all did, I say, in the end. The rain that had been falling for so long finally stopped. The sky cleared. And in Cedar Hollow, Texas, in the autumn of 1880, the people who had been prisoners in their own town learned to breathe free. It cost us everything, but it gave us something worth more: the truth, and each other. And the knowledge that silence in the face of evil is the greatest sin of all. We would never be silent again. The end.